Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, dermatologist, and joining me again this week as co-host, Capping with Candace Hare. This week we go to the rolling hills of Kentucky and we have a rolling pick 3, Candace, and 2 of those races involve juveniles, and then a nice older race. We've seen many of these horses over the last couple of years, the Kentucky Downs layout and just kind of the whole scene kind of makes it a fun day of racing.
It does. It's different. The course is different. We get kind of a more European style course that's undulating, and so it's really fun to watch if you've never seen races from there. And it's a little different to handicap because not every horse handles the course. And these juvenile races in particular, I really personally enjoy because you get a good mix of horses who debuted on the turf, maybe more recently. And then you get some horses who maybe have a couple more races under their belt, a little more experience, but are trying turf for the first time. And, you know, unlike some of the older horses, I wouldn't be dissuaded by some of these horses switching surfaces because, you know, we see it all the time. Some of these horses are really bred for turf, but, you know, up until kind of the last month or so, you don't have a lot of turf made. And so, you know, some of the sprinters in particular might have debuted over the dirt, and then now they're going to try turf for the first time.
Let's start it off with the juvenile fillies, and that one's interesting. Mainly, I didn't pick this horse, but I have noticed, and I kind of wanted to keep an eye out this year for the Lonrose hitting the track, and on the inside there, that Apple Down Under is one of the first Lonrose to win. And what do you think he's going to have for some turf horses?
Yeah, I mean, obviously being by Lonrose, you get a little bit of precocity, and you definitely get the turf pedigree there. I think it's important to note that this is a homebred because the word on the street always was that the best Lonrose were the homebreds, not the ones we were seeing in the sales. So that's a positive sign. For me, the 7 furlongs, what I would also think that's around the distance that they'd excel the most, so the stretch up should be positive. I'm maybe a little bit more worried about the inside draw for these young horses that are a little bit inexperienced over a course like this. I would be a little bit wary. So this is a horse who I expect to take a step forward, but maybe not necessarily win.
And kind of interesting, last week we had the old P-Patch Exacta and the King's Bishop. So I don't think there's going to be people, I mean, people may not pick this horse, but I don't think they're just going to toss it because it ran at Ellis.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, we saw that with Run Happy and with Limousine Liberal, so definitely maybe we'll get a little bit more consideration than normal after that having happened. For me, looking at this race, there's a few horses that stand out. One of them isn't in the race yet. It's a horse named Mom's Choice by Kitten's Joy. I was at Arlington Park when this horse broke its maiden on the Ellington Million undercard, and it was a fantastic effort. This is a horse who went off that day at a very short price off of the fast work at OBS March. I think ran 10-1, and if you go back and watch that work, he really was hardly touched at all. He looked very green. He was all over the place, but he went fast without being urged not nearly as much as you're used to seeing in those 2-year-old sales workouts. So impressed there and backed it up on the track in a really big way. I thought this is a horse who is fast, and so if Mom's Choice somehow gets in the field, that's going to be my choice and one to look at. But since it's not on the field yet, the one that I'm going to take here is Precious Love, the number 6 horse. He's by City Zip, who they tend to be precocious, and 7 furlongs is within their range, a little bit better at these sprinter-miler distances. And Precious Love is a half sibling to Zepessa. And Zepessa we saw debut this year as a 3-year-old at Arlington Park, just rolled them. I think won by over 6 lengths there on debut. Then went to Del Mar, tried a mile on the turf, and again won very easily. Her only poor performance came in her 3rd start in the Del Mar Oaks, where it was just one of those, you know, inexperienced. Went out there, pulled a bunch, and they basically pulled her up in the race. But is a horse who has shown, you know, ability over turf and proven herself to be very fast, which is what I would be looking for in a juvenile race like this. So I'm going to go with the number 6, Precious Love.
You know, from I remember the last couple of years, you know, this course plays long, and it seems like you have to be in shape, but horses that are forwardly placed do well. It's hard to be a deep closer. So I ended up going with Seaside Schiller. for a couple of reasons. I like the fact that he ran and broke his maiden at Belmont, so there's a little bit of class there. But Michael Matz is one of those trainers that does a lot of interval training. He does a lot of long jogs with his horses. So I tend to think him and Graham Motion, so a lot of times their horses can only have 1 or 2 starts, but they do well off layoffs just because they do a lot of kind of a little bit different, and they train them on the farm, so I think the horses don't kind of get into as much of a rut, and they do well. I think they kind of point for meets like this.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's what I couldn't put you off of. I think it'll be a little short, which is why I ended up opting for the 6 at 15-1. But one that in your multiples, if you're playing this pick 3 that we're discussing, I think that's definitely a must use.
I was impressed with Moment Is Right, his big 8-length victory at Gulfstream, but I don't know, is this just another Wesley Ward horse that he had cranked to go first out and then he'll regress, or can he come back here, maybe go into the turf, because Wesley does well with those type of horses?
Yeah, and I didn't love his Schulerville very much there. I know he had a little bit of trouble at the start and was up on a very fast pace, but I think that this is a horse that is very one-dimensional. Whether they're going fast or slow, he's going to be on the front, and I'm just not sure that that's something that he can sustain in a race like this.
Well, it should be interesting. I think what we see with races like this, especially in the pick 3s and from previous years, is that, don't be afraid. This is one of the few meets where you can really spread out some tickets, because just with the lower takeout and then the full fields, horses that might be 6-1 on the win board sometimes can go off at 10 or 12-1 in the daily doubles and pick 3s. So you really have to, it's kind of a combination of 2 things. You have to pick the right contenders, because unless you do the old take them all, take them all, take them all. But so to me, it's like you have to make strong opinions, but you can go 4 or 5 deep in some of these races.
Absolutely. So, it's always the same for me. It's just, keep honing on the races where you have a really strong opinion, and then don't be afraid to spread in the other spots. Because like you said, the takeout is low here, the fields are big, so if you hit, you're usually going to get paid.
8th race is the Calumet Farm Juvenile Stakes. This is the colts and the boys, and 7 furlongs. And again, kind of a mixture of some horses that are bred for the turf, and then some horses really with just 1 lifetime races now going right into facing other winners.
Yeah, we even have a couple first-time starters in here, both the 2. The 2's making his first start ever. The 9's making first start North America. I'll talk about 9 Lil's Good Intent. It's 92 on the morning line here. Broke his maiden at Newcastle. Now, Newcastle's a flat course, so that's not going to help over the undulations here by any means. And that was a poor race. Actually ran in a maiden auction race, which is kind of the equivalent of like a maiden claiming race here. And nobody from that race has ever won a race since, so it's not a race that I would be looking at as any sort of positive indicator of where he's going to be going. He was very green in there and just ran like a very inexperienced horse, and that was only a short time ago in July. So at 92, Good Intent is a horse who I would be against, definitely. For me, the horse who I ended up picking here is the 8, Cajun Shill. This is a horse who debuted at Gulfstream over the dirt, going 4.5 furlongs back in June, and just looked like he needed so much further ground. It was closing late, but the winner was long gone by then. The winner won by 9 3/4 lengths. Came back then, kind of short rest, and caught a sloppy track and, improved, ran second. And then last time out in his 3rd start, got 5 furlongs on the turf and blew him away. So this is just a horse to me that keeps every race, he kind of takes a step in the right direction. He is a half sibling to a couple useful turf runners, so the turf definitely seems like it's the place where he wants to be. And with the, just the way he's shaped in his races, he strikes me as one who is going to improve with a little bit of added distance as well. So 10-1 the morning line, I like that price. I'm going to go with Cajun Shill.
Interesting, we saw there's a couple of Artie Schillers in both these races. Of course, he was a very good turf miler himself. And then I noticed, for many years there, one of the angles that a lot of handicappers would play would be the More Than Readies on the turf. And now we're starting to see some grandsons of his, a couple horses in this race from Reddy's Image. What do you think? Do you think that's going to be a turf line that continues, or kind of how do you think that'll go?
I would think so because, More Than Ready is a weird one for us because we remember him having been on the dirt, but he has proven to be such a staunch turf sire, and that pedigree, really has turf lines everywhere. So I certainly would expect, that to be a line that translates to the turf going forward.
Yeah, I ended up going with one of my old standby angles in this race. I think the morning line may be a little off. John Q. Public is 4-1, but I think he's going to drift up to 6-1. And I like him. This is one of, for those of us who have been following Wayne Lukas for many years, who just turned 80 as we're recording this today. This is one of his old standbys with juveniles. He is not afraid to let a horse lose by 10, 15 lengths and come back and win later on as a juvenile. And this horse kind of fits that pattern. He won his debut at the Pea Patch, and then he went to the Spa, and he really just didn't run at all in that Sanford race. Now, that last race, it was a 6-horse field. I really wasn't impressed with the field going into that race. I'm reaching a little bit here, but I think with that inside post, and there actually is a little bit of hidden turf breeding here, so I'm thinking maybe at 6-7-1, he's very usable, and I think John Q. Public may have a slight chance here.
Yeah, I mean, he's interesting to me. Like you say, Lukas knows his horses, and when he puts a horse in, I feel like he knows it's ready. And I know this horse has come out of some, finishes that aren't flattering, but they're also were at levels much higher than this. So I think he's interesting in this race, probably most of all because he's fast. He didn't stay at all in that Saratoga Special against better horses than this, but he was out there in the lead and setting a fast pace for a bit there. If they let him go doing something like that here, he's going to be way ahead of them. So don't ever discount a horse switching surfaces from dirt to turf who has a lot of front-end speed, because they can be very dangerous. Obviously, turf races tend to run a little bit on the slower side fractions-wise, at the start. Whereas like dirt races, your typical dirt race is going to be, fast-paced early, slow finish. Turf races are kind of the reverse. So a horse like him can always be dangerous on the switch.
And just something interesting to note, Wayne Lukas trained both the sire and the broodmare sire of this horse. So he knows a little bit about this family, Honor and Glory. He trained, and then also he trained Proud Citizen to a second-place finish in the Kentucky Derby the year that Bob Baffert's War Emblem went wire to wire. So horse with the rail, a little bit of speed, switching surfaces. He may wake up a little bit. Do want to point out the mare of Red Hot Warrior, the 7-horse in this race, by Warfront, who was a horse trained by Neil Drysdale. This mare is a stakes winner, and she was more of a sprinter, but she's produced some nice winners, and she was a stone-cold runner. So at 10-12-1, Tom Amos, I think people are going to be going Thistledown. That may have been the plan may have been just to kind of give him a run that first out, and then he did win by 5 the second race, and now he moves way up in class. But, I mean, at a silly price like 20-1, I don't know, maybe he's worth throwing in there.
He is, and, one of the fun things for me like this is it seems like now we're seeing so many of these homebreds out here, which is fun. I think, whereas in the beginning of the juvenile season, we see a lot more of the horses who were maybe expensive 2-year-olds, sales purchases and the like. But now it seems like, the homebreds are popping up, and those are always more interesting juveniles for me, sometimes because you have some of these long-standing families coming forward. So Red Hot Warrior is definitely one of those.
Should be an exciting daily double and 2/3 of the pick 3. Now we move into the More Than Ready Mile. We just talked about him as a grandsire. Now they actually named a stakes race after him. And this one's got a $300,000 purse. Again, we get horses shipping in from Canterbury and Saratoga and out west, and they kind of meet on a tough, demanding mile. And there are a few well-known turf trainers in this race, but we even get a couple of our veteran horses like Sky Ring and even Departing now entered in this race.
I am so confused by some of these. Why is Undrafted here? He's not a miler. Why is Green Mask here? I mean, these are
Old buddy Green Mask.
These are a couple just straight sprinters. A Green Mask in particular, I would say, probably does his best running over 5 furlongs. Undrafted, obviously, we saw him win last time out at Royal Ascot, but he's not a miler, so I'm extremely confused by why these horses are here, or even if one or both of them will even really run. I don't know. Something weird's going on with that. If one or both of them scratches, I wouldn't be surprised because I kind of don't understand why they're here. But even but with undrafted, you get a lot more speed injected into the race. But even without him, this is going to be fast. Regally Ready is fast. Taurus, we know, has only one way to go, and that's to the front. Skyring is fast. So I'm looking for a horse in here who comes from off the pace. I think people in this race are going to gravitate to the big names. They know the Taurus, they know the Departings, they know the Undrafted, the Green Masks, and those are the horses that are going to take a lot of money, even if pretty much all of them are coming off of long layoffs. Departing is coming in here off of a poor effort in the Vanderbilt. Why they switched him back to dirt after he had turf success, I don't know. He fits better in this spot, and of those big names, he's the only one I would use. But my top choice in here is going to be Pumpkin Rumble from Canterbury to Kentucky Downs. I liked his last race in the stakes there at Canterbury. Thought he won pretty well. They had talked a little bit about sending him, over to, the Arlington Million undercard. They didn't end up doing it. I think this is a much better spot for him. And just having that one race under his belt off the long layoff is going to do him a world of good. I have a feeling he's been pointing to the spot ever since they had decided that Arlington wasn't the case. So I think Pumpkin Rumble's ready and should kind of sit the perfect trip in this sort of a race.
Well, and he's another one, his most recent race was at Canterbury, but I mean, this guy has faced a horse like Ring Weekend at Belmont, and he's also faced Long on Value, and, Chocolate Ridge even ran well at the fairgrounds this spring. He was in good form that time. And then also another thing, that last race, he beat horses with, a lot of wins. That Red Zeus is like an 8 or 9-year-old with like 10 or 13 wins. So he beat horses with some wins. Tourist was intriguing. He tends to get bet down. It just seems like a prep to me. I couldn't, I think he's got a little bit of a class edge major, but this just seems like a total prep for Keeneland. At least that's the way I'm taking it. Skyring just has no current form, although I do think he does got a little bit of a class edge. I ended up going with a horse that doesn't win very often. He's on the outside, but Fredericksburg is one of those horses that he's had a couple of races, won against Mishawish a couple of times, and then even that second to Za Approval. I think sitting here on the 10 hole on the outside, he could be 15 to 1, and I could see him kind of making his presence felt. He ships in from the mountain, and that last race was he runs his race every time, and every once in a while he kind of picks up. Even that Guy's Reward race that he ran second to is capable of being competitive with this group. And I just can't take horses out of form like Skyring, and then Tourist. It just seems like such an obvious prep. And then you're right. I mean, undrafted may just win, but it's a goofy spot.
Yeah, I don't understand the spot at all. The course, he should be suited by the course, no doubt. He's traveled over courses like this in victories of his overseas in the past. Just the distance seems all sort of wrong. It's one of those things. It's like when we see races and we see, a class drop that's a suspect class drop. This is just such a suspect placement that I get scared away from it. I don't want to touch him over a mile. I don't get it at all. The other horse I want to mention outside from Pumpkin Rumble was Knight's Nation. He's a horse who comes out of some of the same Churchill Downs races as Departing, finished second to Departing in the Firecracker. And he's just a guy that he just needs a little pace, and he really, really gets it. So, again, in a race like this where we should get some early pace, from the get-go, whether or not undrafted runs, Knight's Nation is intriguing to me at 10 to 1 too. So for me, this is a race I'm looking for the more fit, kind of, smaller name horses in here. I'm going to kind of stay away from the big dogs, like you say, not even just for Taurus, but for a few of these, this kind of screams prep. So I'm going to go for Pumpkin Rumble, Knight's Nation, and Departing are the ones I'm going to use in this spot. But Pumpkin Rumble is the one I'm really looking to make that win bet on. Especially if he's 20 to 1. That seems a kind of a ridiculous price. I don't know if he'll actually go off at that.
Yeah, but I think he'll be 20 to 1s and doubles and pick threes. So, I think if you're thinking that way, you got to throw him in there. And then, win odds are always a little bit subjective to the type of crowd they have. And the handle should be big. I agree with you on Knights Nation. I thought, departing when he finally got that last win, it was impressive because he made that bold move at the rail. I mean, he had no room.
No.
So I was impressed that day because, he got the run. He really, I mean, I think I was more impressed with the jockey just
Yeah, he was
saying,
brave.
and he was brave to go through there, but he did save some ground. You could probably argue that Knights Nation was probably even the better horse in that race. It was just a bold move by the jockey, and I was impressed that Departing was able to do it. But he seems like the horse to me that isn't going to like a hills and a long mile and a full field. Like, that's just not his game.
Yes. No, that's exactly the angles I would have on him too.
So yeah, I think there's some playable horses here. I ended up going with Fredericksburg, but I definitely think Knights Nation's a use. I think you can use Pumpkin Rumble and Sky Ring still intrigues me a little bit, but I really can't go anywhere near Tourist. Departing, I'm not a big fan of, and then Undrafted. I think he's usable, but it still seems like a weird spot. Green Mask, I guess if they do both go in there, I assume Green Mask is just the sacrificial pace setter because
Isn't it weird because Green Mask lately has been coming from off the pace? So
yeah, he's been running shorter
sense.
distances from off the pace.
Yeah, so again, it just doesn't, both of them make zero sense in this race at all.
So yeah, it's kind of fun. Now, for those of you people that may be not familiar with Kentucky Downs, they have the historical racing, which is the slot machines. So that brings in the big purse, 5-day meet, low takeout, lots of good wagers, and they get a pretty good they'll get 5,000-6,000 people to go down there. It's near the Tennessee border, so they get some of those people up from the people take a break from making moonshine to come on up and watch some horse racing.
Yep, exactly.
All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire. We'll be back again next week as we start the first week of September.